And he is a research physicist working at Brookhaven National Laboratory. He's going to be talking to us about the question that he's posing tonight in his talk is, what can ChatGPT teach us about the human soul? He's a very distinguished scientist, and most of the words on this bio that I have for him, I don't understand it at all. But I'm sure he'll speak in layman's terms that we can all get. He is currently leading the development of the electron injector complex for the future electron ion collider. Prior to this, he worked for the RHIC collider and AGS machines at Brookhaven. That's in New York, where he is tonight, where he joins us from. And before that, at Fermilab's Tevatron. Hope I got that close, Vahid. I have been asked to say a quick prayer before we get started, and I looked and looked for a prayer for AI, but I couldn't find one. But there is one that starts with AI, which is aid and assistance. So I figured that was as good as, and we could all use aid and assistance. So if I may, I'll go ahead and read that now. O thou whose face is the object of my adoration, whose beauty is my sanctuary, whose habitation is my goal, whose praise is my hope, whose providence is my companion, whose love is the cause of my being, whose mention is my solace, whose nearness is my desire, whose presence is my dearest wish and highest aspiration. I entreat thee not to withhold from me the things that thou didst ordain for the chosen one among thy servants. Supply me then with the good of this world and the next. Thou truly art the King of all men. There is no God but thee, the ever forgiving, the most generous. Baha'u'llah. And with that, Dr. Ranjbar, thank you so much for talking to us tonight, and the floor is yours. And share your screen at your pleasure.
Sure. Thank you so much for the Austin community inviting me to give this talk. Before I plow into this, I want to preface this in case people don't realize, maybe they're people not that familiar with the Baha'i faith, that we don't have a priesthood, we don't have a clergy, so pretty much everything that I say here is my view on things, and I could be 100% wrong. So with that, you should understand that there's not Baha'i canon in this at all, or anything remotely resembling authority. So it's just what my views are, just based on reading of the Baha'i sacred scripture, and kind of taking them, looking at this new question, which has arisen, and just the prism. And many Baha'is will come away with completely opposite opinions, and that's totally fine. And I'm probably an outlier. I'll probably tell you that much, and how I view this. So just so you know.
Vahid, I'm sorry, one more piece of housekeeping, and that is, if you do have questions that occur to you during the talk, if you could put them in chat, then at some point, hopefully Vahid will be able to answer a few questions, but instead of interrupting him with questions, we'll let him do his presentation, and then we'll do questions hopefully at the end. So please continue.
Okay, so I am going to begin by assuming that there is that you kind of do know a little bit about the Baha'i faith. So I wasn't, I was kind of debating, should I give a discussion of the history of the background, but I'm going to assume that most of the people know a little bit about what the Baha'i faith is about. And I'm going to kind of plow right into this discussion. So I will go ahead and share my screen. And throw it into presenter mode. So this is what I'm looking at now is kind of started me thinking of, we probably, all of us, if we've paid attention at all to the popular media, we've looked at seen kind of artificial intelligence, especially like ChatGPT, becoming very prominent. It has an immense amount of capabilities. And I wanted to try and understand this a little bit. I mean, for example, with the release of ChatGPT by OpenAI, you've seen people worrying about the capabilities of this new technology. It looks like, this, if you ever played around with it, it can converse fairly freely in flawless grammar on an apparently endless variety of topics. While occasionally it does make factual mistakes, it appears to be capable of using what seems to be human-like reasoning in its conversation. It has purportedly passed several tests, like like the bar exam, some of the more later versions that performed well on the SAT test. It can also, I use this myself, generated new and complex computer code on demand, which can help you solve a lot of very hard problems. Concurrent to this, you also have the rise of other types of AI, which are capable of generating images. These are known as like one of the well-known ones is called Stable Diffusion. You have Mid-Journey, and they can generate really quite amazing images. Some of them have won art competitions, and then there's been a big controversy about that. They can appear from photorealistic types of images all the way down to like hand-drawn artistic images, and they all are just based on a series of word prompts that can get. And what you're actually looking at here is an example, like in the presentation of some of these images. So, debates have really ensued over what degree are these computers imitating the rational and creative aspects of human consciousness. Now, I think everyone will agree, except for some outliers, that these systems really have not risen to a high enough level to faithfully emulate a true human consciousness, as the ambition of the so-called artificial general intelligence project is. So that's kind of the gold standard that you'd like that the people would like to be able to do. But they're clearly performing intellectual and rational processes. And one might argue that this is a type of thinking. I also think there are many who kind of come on the heels and dismiss this and say, oh no, this is just sophisticated cut and paste. It's just mixing and matching and nothing really too special is going on here. I think that from the outset, I think that's a mistake. These systems are really doing something much, much more. Apart from their superficial imitation of the neural structure of the human mind using these so-called neural networks, they appear to be constructing very sophisticated models of the world in a way which I don't think any other organism outside of humans has been able to achieve. So let me kind of go a little bit over like how they work. So modern artificial intelligence is based on basically layers of these interconnected neurons. Like I said, they're trying to, the inspiration for these neural networks was the mind, how the neurons are connected in a brain. And so the structure is that you have these interconnected level neurons, which you kind of see in this graphic here, in which in a very rudimentary way imitates how biological neurons are activated. Now, when you get to what the term they use is so-called deep neural networks, they consist of many layers of these networks. So, for example, on the image here, you're going to have each of these is considered a layer, and you're going to have a whole bunch of those. Let me put my pointer on here so you can see. So this is the first layer, second layer, third layer, and then it goes down to some hidden layer, and then this is actually a particular architecture. They don't all follow this exactly. But the point with a deep neural network is that now you have, because you have more processing power, you can have many of these layers, like quite a lot of them. And what's special about these neural networks that people who have researched this have come to kind of realize is that they produce what's called an information bottleneck. This is a term that was coined by the late Naftali Tishby. He was a researcher out of Jerusalem University, and he kind of came up with this idea that what's going on with these systems is that they basically create this information bottleneck where you're forced, because of this bottleneck, to reduce the amount of input information down to some smaller subset that represents what your input is. And so this, and this is actually in this so-called encoder-decoder type of architecture. It's actually, this type of compression is explicit. So everything gets compressed down to this lower layer, and then later on it gets blown up. And then what's done in these codes like ChatGPT, after being trained this way, kind of basically inputting data and then making sure it matches the output data. You do this a bunch of times on a wide variety of data. Then you split this, and now all of a sudden, you start playing with the input just to the code to generate whatever you want the output. So this is how the image generation works. So you put some weights here on this lower hidden layer, and then it will generate an image from that. And that's kind of the idea. And this is kind of similar also how the large language models work for ChatGPT, a similar idea. So what is going on here, and why I say it's not just cut and paste here, is that what's going on is you're actually developing what is this reduced semantic model of the world around them. Now, when I talk about semantics, just to be clear here, what it really means is when two variables, we're talking semantic information here, you're talking about when two variables are correlated and that they have information about each other. So one kind of trivial example would be like if you had your watch, right? And your watch, you could say, has semantic information about the Earth-Sun system, in that the watch, the arms of the watch are going to correlate with when the sun is going to set and when the sun is going to rise. It's kind of related to that. If you know what the arms are doing, then you can kind of predict how the sun and the earth are moving. And so you can then say that there's this system has semantic information relative to each other. Now, what's interesting about this is that it really mirrors, I think, the whole thrust and progress of human science. So human scientific progress generates better and better. You can look at it this way: is it generating better and better mathematical models of the physical world? So if you look at, for example, the Copernican revolution, where we moved from this Earth-centered model of the universe to a sun-centered model of the universe. Well, why was this useful? Well, what was very useful about it is that it allowed us to generate these new models of the universe, which were so much more simpler and much more reduced. And so the mathematics, I mean, if you look at the calculations that people needed to go through and the contortions that they had to do to predict the motion of the planets, it was incredible. They developed these really complex machines and ways to calculate all these different astronomical, the orbits and things like that. But by moving to this sun-centered model, all of a sudden this became so much more easy. And thus there were far fewer variables to contend with. And so predictions and calculations became much simpler. And that was the power. And if you look throughout history, you'll see this is really the progress which you can look through the lens of what science is doing, is we're developing each time better and better models which are able to make predictions which beat chance. And these models contain what I would call semantic information. So this process is a process of generating increasingly reduced semantic models of the physical world. And this, I think, kind of sums up this thrust and progress of scientific inquiry. Now, what's interesting about this is there are several thinkers that have suggested that this process of developing models which predict the world better and better might actually be one of the key drivers of evolution. So if you think about it, the evolutionary value of these semantic models lies in their ability to make predictions with which we can use in order to create or maintain a given order or structure. And so this is why complex systems reward handsomely any subsystem with the ability to do this. So this is why you can become billionaire if you're able to predict the stock market, right? Because this economic system is going to reward you immensely because that's so valuable. This ability to make predictions that beat chance, and this is true for any ecosystem. So let me turn to now this question back to AI. Is it conceivable that these systems could ever harbor something akin to a human soul? And I think this is not necessarily a silly question anymore, or something for just science fiction. And I think we need to pay attention and think about this. And I think answering this forces us to reflect on the nature of our own consciousness and soul. And this question, I think, exposes the truth of Baha'u'llah's statement, where he says, "Know verily that the soul is a sign of God, a heavenly gem whose reality the most learned of men hath failed to grasp, and whose mystery no mind, however acute, can ever hope to unravel." Baha'i scripture has much to say about the human soul, and these include such questions as the purpose of the human soul, its key characteristics and uniqueness, how the human soul is different from other organisms, and the possibility of what Abdu'l-Baha termed true creation. And finally, also the extent and possibility of self-knowledge. So getting to the question of the purpose of creation, well, one of the most important, I think, important passages in Baha'u'llah's writings deals directly with this question. He says, "Having created the world and all that liveth and moveth therein, he, through the direct operation of his unconstrained and sovereign will, chose to confer upon man the unique distinction and capacity to know him and to love him, a capacity that must needs be regarded as the generating impulse and primary purpose underlying the whole of creation." And he goes on then to say, "Upon the inmost reality of each and every created thing, he hath shed the light of one of his names and made it a recipient of the glory of one of his attributes. Upon the reality of man, however, he hath focused the radiance of all of his names and attributes and made it a mirror of his own self. Alone of all created things, man hath been singled out for so great a favor and so enduring a bounty." So I think you see from this that in the first place, it makes plain and evident a really kind of stunning thing I find is that the very purpose of the universe, why it exists, why it has come to be, is to bring forth creatures who will know and love God. This is the primary purpose of it. And I want to also make clear that what we mean, and so this is how we're defining man almost, is a being that can know and love God. And it's this being that is also able to mirror God on some level, it appears. But I want to be clear too, it's important to clarify what we mean by this term man. So some religious people hold to the idea that an immortal soul is confined only to the biological human species. However, I don't think this is a Baha'i belief, subscribe to this belief. And in fact, I think many would agree with me that man, as it's used in the Baha'i writings, transcends, first of all, obviously transcends any gender notion. So it's both men and women, obviously. But also it appears to be a general term which implies an archetypal creature that harbors a soul capable of knowing God. So Baha'u'llah actually goes on to explain that there are actually other creatures. So he says, verily, the creation of God embraceth worlds besides this world, and creatures apart from these creatures. In each of these worlds, he hath ordained things which none can search except himself, the all-searching, the all-wise. Do thou meditate on that which we have revealed unto thee, that thou mayest discover the purpose of God, thy Lord, the Lord of all worlds. And on this point, also, I mean, I want to also go, there's discussions of this question by Abdu'l-Baha. So Abdu'l-Baha goes on and he explains that the splendors of all the divine perfections is manifest in the reality of man. It is for this reason that he is the vice-regent and apostle of God. If man did not exist, the universe would be without result. For the purpose of existence is the revelation of the divine perfections. We cannot say then that there was a time when man was not. At most we can say was that there was a time when this earth did not exist, and that at the beginning man was not present upon it. So I think on this point, Shoghi Effendi, the guardian and authorized interpreter of the Baha'i faith, explains. Abdu'l-Baha stated that there are other worlds other than ours which are inhabited by beings capable of knowing God. So this, of course, assumes that the ability to know God is a sufficient requirement for the existence of a human soul as it is described in the Baha'i writings. There's another beautiful description of what the soul is, which the Bab has given. He is the forerunner of Baha'u'llah. And this is a translation that Nader Saidi gave and gave to the heart, but it's such a beautiful thing. I always love to quote it. So he goes, therefore, it is necessary, according to true wisdom, that the pre-existent God describe himself to his creatures, that they may recognize their creator, and that out of the grace of the pre-existent, the contingent beings may attain their supreme end. This divine self-description is itself a created thing. It is unlike any other description, the sign of he is the one who hath no equal. And the truth of the servant, his true being. Whoso hath recognized it, hath recognized his Lord. The description denoted as the soul or self, and he who hath known himself hath known his Lord. At other times it is expressed as the heart, which is a description of the divinity by the divinity and is the essence of servitude. So I like, I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Phelps. He's given also some really wonderful talks. And one of the things that he kind of draws a parallel to this understanding of the soul as a type of self-description is he's related it back to this famous statement of Carl Sagan's, where he goes, one of the opening episodes of Cosmos, he goes that, we are a way for the universe to know itself. So there's, I think, strong echoes of that idea in this statement. So, but moving on, there's really this, I think, understanding that, well, first of all, I think the implications is that there are most likely a variety of forms and possibly substances from which that qualifies having something like a human soul that it could be comprised of. I mean, this is what we see when I think the previous statements from Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha, that there are other creatures and other planets that are capable of knowing God. So, for example, it seems to me highly likely that these creatures, whatever they are from other worlds, would appear in different physical forms, perhaps employ very different chemical or biological processes, or even be unrecognizable to us, since they may operate at even different scales, both temporal and spatial, and use very different basic substrates. Yet there exists this idea that the creation of life, let alone human-like life, is the reserved product of the divine hand, excluding humans from this creative process. And here, the clear statement of this is in the Baha'i writings seems to be this following from Abdu'l-Baha. He goes, creation means that from every natural composition, a living thing comes into existence, while from chance composition, no living thing will appear. So, for example, if man, with all his astuteness and intelligence, were to gather together and combine certain elements, a living being will not be brought into existence, as it would not be according to the natural order. This is the answer to the implicit question that might arise, that since these beings come into existence through the combination of these elements, then can we not also gather together and combine the very same elements and thus create a living thing? This idea is mistaken, for the original composition is a divine composition, and the combination is produced by God according to the natural order. And it is for this reason that a living being is created from this composition and existence is realized. But a composition made by man produces nothing, because man cannot create life. So I think the predominant understanding, the Baha'is that are familiar with this, is that it would preclude the construction of an artificial intelligence capable of harboring a human-like soul. However, I think there is a lot more nuance in this statement of Abdu'l-Baha's. In fact, the supreme body of the Baha'i faith, the Universal House of Justice, actually addressed this very passage in the context of the possible synthesis of elementary forms of life. And they say, to understand the implications of this statement, it is necessary to know what the master meant by a living being, and what limitations he intended by the phrases of his own mind and intelligence. And since the system is unnatural, as the science of biology develops and men acquire even deeper insights into the nature of living things, these implications will no doubt become clearer. And in fact, if you think a little more about this, you'll see that on the surface, the act of, for example, human procreation is due to the physical actions of humans. Yet the result of this physical acts are still somehow attributed to the divine hand. So the concept of the operation of the divine creative hand does not necessarily preclude the actions of humans in the process. What it does seem to require is following a natural order and allowing God to make the combination. And this to me seems to be the important question. What did Abdu'l-Baha mean by the term natural order? And how do we allow God to make the combination? So I think maybe some further light can be given by this Abdu'l-Baha's discussion about how the human soul becomes associated with the body and history of its evolution on the planet. He goes, in sum, the completeness of each and everything, that is, the completeness which you now see in man or in other beings with regards to their parts, members, and powers, arise from their component elements, their quantities and measures, the manner of their combination, and their mutual action, interaction, and influence. When all these are brought together, then man comes into existence. As the completeness of man stems entirely from the component elements, their measures, their manner of combination, and the mutual action and interaction of other beings, and since man was produced tens or hundreds of thousands of years ago from the same earthly elements with the same measures and quantities, the same manner of composition and combination, and the same interaction with other beings, it follows that man was exactly the same then, that man was exactly the same then as exists now. This is a self-evident truth and cannot be doubted. And if 1,000 million years hence, the component elements of man were brought together, measured out in the same proportions, combined in the same manner, and subject to the same interactions with other beings, exactly the same man will come into existence. So my reading of this is that we see here that the appearance of man is definitely connected to, quote, the manner of composition and combination. Thus, it seems physically definable and suggests that whenever this combination is realized, man will appear. In another passage, Abdu'l-Baha explains how the spirit becomes associated with the human body in the context of the origin of man on earth. The members, constituent parts, and composition that are found within man attract and act as a magnet for the spirit. The spirit is bound to appear in it. Thus, when a mirror is polished, it is bound to attract the rays of the sun, to be illumined, and to reflect the splendid images. That is, when these physical elements are gathered and combined together according to the natural order and with the utmost perfection, they become a magnet for the spirit, and the spirit will manifest itself therein with all its perfections. So from this, the association of the spirit with the body is due to some property of its physical composition, which acts as a magnet for the spirit. While this property is achieved by following a natural order, it appears logical to conclude that it remains still a physical order, which for some reason attracts the non-physical spirit. So now I want to go on to this, the next question of how man is different. So Abdu'l-Baha goes on also to explain that. So let me back up here. So we're saying here, if we follow a natural order, that humans might be able to bring a new life or human consciousness into existence. This is the question. And to me, this remains an open question. Whether in our pursuit of generating these so-called AGIs, we might in fact create some appropriate magnet for the appearance of the spirit. that we might somehow make a channel for this natural order, assuming, of course, that the appearance of the soul in the human body is due somehow to the human biological brain functionings and what collectively occurs in its synapses. To me, there doesn't seem to be any fundamental limitation that might preference synapses made of organic material over those made of silicon or some other material, unless our biological synapses are somehow summoning maybe some type of quantum mechanical aspect of physics, which our existing switches are not yet able to replicate. But even in this case, that would just limit the probable eventual fall. This would eventually fall away as the march of technology moves on. So it would seem to me that indeed the appearance of a soul across a variety of different chemical and physical substrates is actually implied by Abdu'l-Baha's statements about the appearance of life on other worlds. So now the question is, okay, imagine now we were actually to somehow summon such a being into existence. How would we recognize it? And to this end, Abdu'l-Baha explains in many places how man is actually different from other organisms. So he explains in some answer questions, the human spirit, which distinguishes man from animal, is the rational soul. And these two terms, the human spirit and the rational soul, designate one and the same thing. This spirit, which the terminology of the philosophers is called the rational soul, encompasses all things, and as far as human capacity permits, discovers their realities and becomes aware of the properties and effects, the characteristics and conditions of earthly things. As for the mind, it is a power of the human spirit. The spirit is as a lamp, and the mind as the light that shines from it. The spirit is as a tree, and the mind as the fruit. The mind is the perfection of the spirit and necessary attribute thereof, even as the rays of the sun are an essential requirement of the sun itself. So we see that the rational soul, which generates the mind, is distinguished by its capacity to encompass and discover realities. It is this capacity that makes man different. Also in the same passage, he goes on to explain that this rational soul is also capable of harboring another level of existence, which he terms the spirit of faith. But the human spirit, unless it be assisted by the spirit of faith, cannot become acquainted with the divine mysteries and heavenly realities. It is like a mirror which, although clear, bright, and polished, is still in need of light. Not until a sunbeam falls upon it can it discover the divine mysteries. So, and this is, again, if you read Baha'u'llah's writings, the first, actually, the very first one I quote, he also kind of refers to the same idea, that this capacity to know and love God, this can only be achieved if that mirror is polished, but it can't do it by itself. Unaided, it won't do it. This is the role of the manifestations of God plays to help us clean that soul, clean that mirror and polish it so that it can reflect this light. So the spirit of faith, I think, can be understood as the realization of this latent capacity to know and love God. It is this spirit which true religion, as brought by the prophets of God, enables. Ultimately, I think the litmus test for the existence of a human soul is the potential for the appearance of this spirit of faith, which permits the reflection of the light and glory of God. So I think that's it. I mean, I'm leaving this kind of because I don't know basically the answer to this, but I think there are still questions out there, and we should watch this carefully and pay attention. And I think it would be short-sighted to dismiss it and just say, oh, well, that's impossible. It would never happen. I think we should be slightly open-minded, because I don't think it's a hard and fast, at least to me, not entirely clear. It's not an open and shut case. So that's the end of my. I'm now open for questions. If people have, I see there's something in the chat here. Let me oops. See what problem is. Maybe I stop sharing so I can read. Stop sharing. I can see the chat. So it says, humanoid robot smiles, warns of negative impact on society of artificial intelligence, and article titled from USA Today about Amica. Oh, that's it.
Not really a question. I guess that's just a reference. Was it? Yeah. And hello, Dr. Jackson.
Hey there, Averill.
Formerly of Austin, now of Boston.
Now in Boston.
Just keeping the rhymes going. Well, that was fascinating fodder, Vahid. And so please, anyone who has a curiosity, a question, a comment, we can just go ahead and take a few minutes and let's see. Did I see Sergey on here earlier? He must have dropped off. We have a young man in our community who is a virtuoso with AI art. I saw that those in the slides you have, generated by the author. And what was the name of the program?
Oh, that was the Stable Diffusion.
Stable Diffusion.
I played around with that a while back before I did the presentation. I thought, well, I can make a few images. Some of the others, though, they weren't mine. Those are actually other artists using Midjourney had created those. Those are quite amazing images that they were able to make.
So this is nothing as deep as what you were talking about, but just for my own curiosity, what's an example of something that you would write? So you're writing descriptions of things that you want to see when you create those pieces of art, right? What would be an example? Like just throw something out.
Say, like, I think one of the images I said, make image of image of a man standing by the ocean in the style of Chinese art or something like that, and then it would generate an image like that,
And then you can revise that as you go.
Yeah. And it will give you different versions of it too. It'll give you multiple, and if you give the same prompt multiple times, as it's kind of random, it'll give you different things.
Oh, okay.
So you
can say something like make the sky more orange or something like that, and it'll respond to those types of commands as well.
Yeah,
I assume. Yeah. Okay, interesting.
So I see in the chat someone has asked, yes. What is man's reality? Is ChatGPT a subscription? It seemed very divergent here, but what is man's reality? I mean, that's the question that Baha'u'llah says we will never know, right? If I mean, that's the famous saying, the tradition that he who knows himself knows God. That Baha'u'llah kind of expatiates on in this one of his tablets and discusses. So I wouldn't claim to know that, other than I think he makes clear that that we are created to know and love God. I mean, that's the purpose. Says there are plenty of streamers that post Midjourney capabilities on YouTube. Yeah, there's a lot. A comment and question from Steve Collins on YouTube. Okay. I've had some success with AI bots being walked through William Hatcher's millennialism, proof of God through symbolic logic. It's an interesting exercise. Has anyone tried to do this digesting the 80 to 150 or so of this book. I haven't. I think I have his book, but I haven't tried that. Is there a free version? Yeah, someone's answering whether it's a subscription. There's a free version of it. ChatGPT, people are asking. But you can also pay and have one that doesn't time out. And you can also then get access to the latest, better, smarter version, supposedly, of it.
So Vahid, I felt at in the beginning of your talk, your remarks, I kind of felt you leading us in one direction, like,
Yeah.
well, this is actually possible.
Yeah.
That we could create something with the soul. And then in another section, there was a
Well,
sort
I don't know.
of a caveat section of saying,
I'm expressing an honest doubt. I don't know. I just think I'm not going to say, I can't say honestly that one way or another on this. I think the jury is out on this. There's that statement of Abdul Bahá's, which is a challenging one to understand. What is a natural order? What does that mean? What does he mean in that statement? And I don't claim that I grasped it fully. But then there's also these other statements which kind of make you think, well, what is this barrier? Why wouldn't it, there's synapses in our brain. Why couldn't we recreate them? What's special about it? The only thing I think, like my private opinion is that, and I kind of alluded to that in my discussion, is that I think you probably need to tap into quantum mechanics somehow. Because my pet theory, again, this is all my private.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, is that really how God I think, okay, so when you look at like really basic physics of the world, how this world works, right? You find out everything boils down to quantum mechanics at its fundamental level. That's kind of what modern physics has taught us, is that it's okay, forget about general relativity, it's quantum mechanics all the way. That's the basic primal description of reality. And what that tells us is that there are basically two types of processes that are going on in the universe. There is one which the famous physicist von Neumann called causal type of physics, where it's predicted, it's information preserving. If you know the initial condition, you can exactly predict how it's going to end, or you can tell exactly where it came from. Go in the forward in time and backward in time, and exactly. It's perfectly predictable. That and then there's another type of physics that goes on, that's acausal, that basically you don't predict it. And that occurs whenever you make a measurement. When you make a measurement, or you so-called collapse the wave function, you don't know how it's going to come out. It's not predictable. And people say, well, it's random. Well, when you say it's random, what you're really saying is, I don't know. If you had a model that predicted it, then you would use that model. But what you're saying when you're saying it's random is you're saying, I don't have a model. We don't know what happens. And in my humble opinion, I think this is where the primal will of God operates in. And this is how he governs the universe. This is how he brings order. Because actually, it turns out that you need that randomness. Otherwise, where are you going to get the primal symmetry breaking in order to generate our universe to begin with? You're not, unless you believe in a deity, which we do, but I'm just saying, if you forget about that fact, you're not going to, there's no mechanism to generate the first, the first order that you're going to get, whatever. And most physicists believe this, that it happened through some quantum fluctuation, initial quantum fluctuation. That's what kind of gave rise to the so-called Big Bang, And so anyways, so I think that if you want to bring consciousness into existence, right, I think you have to tap into that. That's the primal order. That's what you have to connect to. And I kind of think that that's what human minds are doing, is that we are, although this is highly debatable, and people say, well, it's too wet, and all our brains are too wet and messy for quantum coherence to be sustained in there. There's actually a lot of evidence, circumstantial evidence, that actually maybe they are able to maintain that coherence. There's some recent studies that were done. So I think the jury is still out on that. And I think my, again, private opinion and prejudice is that I think that we're going to find out that you need quantum mechanics for this. And if you ever wanted to hope to bring some type of artificial intelligence in the future into existence, you need to tap into that. Anyways.
It's fascinating. I feel like a lot of the terms you just used, people normally just think of as magic.
Yeah.
They got lumped together in magic. It looks like Nick has a comment or a question here. One conversation that is less talked about regarding the adoption of AI is how much our consumption of content, or literally anything, will change drastically, not just the creation aspect. All the structures build up around, example, Google framework, searching and navigating the internet will drastically change. Will this change our addiction to the digital era for the better? Live more in the moment, less time bouncing between web pages. Will education of the masses speed up? Lots of structures will dissolve, adapt, and change, not just disrupt art market. A lot of questions embedded in there. Any thoughts?
I don't know. I not feel competent to know what is going to happen. It's really it's a big massive change that we're witnessing, and I think it's only going to accelerate. And I can't predict how this is going to go. I just can't. I don't know.
The question about our addictions to digital content is a big one. Huge one.
It's scary because these things are smart and they can manipulate us. They know how to push our buttons, and we're unfortunately more predictable than we care to believe.
That's right.
They know how to they figure out how to say the right thing, to manipulate our emotions and manipulate us a certain way and to get us to behave. So I think people have worried about this. This could be a danger.
Can I ask a question while I'm here? We were recently, of last 8-10 years, reading about human beings being able to clone sheep. Everybody's come across the cloning of sheep.
Right.
Has anybody tried to clone human beings?
Yeah, I believe.
Were they able to do that? Were the human being less than other human beings because they did not have a soul?
No.
I'm confused about that.
No, I think anyone will tell you that, it's like identical twins. They both have a soul. I don't think that's an issue. And yes, I think in China they tried to a while back, and they were severely reprimanded. I mean, there was a big scandal about this. I think they tried something like that. But I mean, there's still problems, I think, with it, in the sense that I think that you get a lot of. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm not a biologist or anything, so I'm just speaking like anyone else. But I think it's if someone knows this better than me, they're welcome to chime in. But I think there's some issues even with the sheep, that you get some genetic damage, or some issues with but I don't think it's an issue of whether it has a soul or it doesn't. I don't doubt it has a soul. It would have a soul.
Charles, can you unmute and give us your thoughts that you put in chat here? Kind of summarize those.
Yeah, no. So can everyone hear me? Can you hear me? All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a climate scientist. I do numerical weathering of climate, and one of the things I enjoy most about that topic is that the code that describes weather is fairly simple, and it plays out like the climate system, and you learn from it. And it's the weather phenomenon are what we call an emergent property of that few laws that you know, fluid on a sphere that you heat up and the like. So I like your presentation in terms of the things that we're learning about how the brain works and operates in terms of processing information. So I was just thinking that certainly at some point we'll get very good at this, and that this consciousness is kind of is the goal of AI research, right? That it will get good enough to mimic, and I'm not sure if it would be considered consciousness, but at some point good enough to mimic the way that the brain works to solve problems and the like. So I just like the premise that at some point, like you were kind of casted as you're being uncertain, you know, will it cross some sort of divide to being consciousness as an emergent property of this a good program. And I'm just saying that I like that concept because it seems like we're playing that out in other contexts of what we do currently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, unless there's some weird secret sauce that I don't know about. And the only secret sauce I can think of is, like I said before, maybe it's related to quantum mechanics somehow, that we need that sauce. But even that sauce, I think technology will give us that. So
It'll be for sale before long.
yeah,
That sauce.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe there's something we don't know about still. I mean, I'm ready to admit, you know, we could be missing something completely that we don't know, you know.
Adib says, well, let's see. Ramin says, I believe humanity is playing around with something that they still don't have a good grasp on. We are moving in the right direction, but the technology seems to have taken a speed of its own, and humanity is not caught up yet with the implications. Agree? Disagree?
Absolutely agree, but I don't see any way. Or, you know, there was some talk, we should pause, you know, there's Elon Musk. That's impossible. There's no way. You think if we pause it, that the other people, it's not going to happen. It's just not in this environment. I don't think it's conceivable that you can actually, unless all the governments of the world, and we'd love that as Baha'is, but you know, they would have to get together and decide.
Glenn Little on YouTube comments, Orson Scott Card's Ender novels have a Jane character where he explores the idea that souls are attracted to an appropriate body at birth. Jane is a computer that attracted a soul and therefore was sentient. Some familiar themes there from your talk.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know.
Well, we're at 8:30 right now. We don't have to end, but we don't have to go on either. It goes both ways. What is the will of the group? Does anyone else have a question that they'd like to pose to Vahid?
Yeah, we could see if anyone has any more questions. Yeah.
There's another one here, looks like. Another one from Nick.
Yeah.
I'll just read it aloud. We just had a recently released model storyteller, which can contextualize and generate new text based on entire novels. Unfortunately, and dangerously so, we are already seeing a gold rush of people rushing to to feed the King James Bible and other such texts in an effort to be the first to say, I've had a conversation with sorry, it keeps jumping every time somebody else posts a conversation with the essence of the divine. It's a big danger. 2-hour dialogue. My father about this, Jordan Peterson, also had a great discourse about misappropriating AI in scripture. I haven't heard anything about that, but have you, Vahid?
No, I haven't. I don't know. I mean, we believe that the Bible has inspired words of God. So there's this idea, I think, that exists in the Baha'i faith, and my understanding of it is that it's not just the word of God is actually a very special thing. It's not just the information content that's in the word of God that makes it the word of God. Baha'u'llah says in some places, I'm not going to be remember it exactly, but basically the manifestation of God could say the most inconsequential, the thing that's been said again and again and again, but the fact that he says it imbues it with a spirit and a power which can transform the souls of human beings. And this is the power, is that the word of God has this ability to change your soul and to create this I was talking about before, this spirit of faith. And this is a mystical thing, and it's of the realms of the spirit. And I just don't see that having that ability. It may produce something interesting, it may make it sound good poetry and all that, but it's not going to have that capacity to take a human being and shake them up and transform them. This is actually what Baha'u'llah, I think, called this is the true work. This is the true alchemy, the ability to take, and this is the great conquering force that we have, with the words of God, which Baha'u'llah brought us, is that it has this power to take a human soul and transform it to gold.
Copper into gold.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah, that's well said.
So then we have also this there, Glenn Little. All the Baha'i writings are known by ChatGPT, and it can explain and explore them well. How can we ensure that these writings are used to contribute to the morality? I think it means morality, maybe.
Yeah.
With the question of the morality, I think if you read a little bit about how they create this, like ChatGPT, first they have this, like I was showing you before, this encoder decoder type of model. This they put it out there, and they basically throw everything at it. It goes through those massive amounts of layers of neurons, and it's transcribed, and it's trained and trained and trained on this. And finally, once it's trained, it's still not done. Then it goes back, and then there's humans who will then, check the responses, and then they correct it and they reinforce it, and then that trains it further. So in a way, you could think that process is kind of enforcing a kind of morality on it, a kind of code. And so there are certain things it won't say, it won't tell you how to make a bomb to kill lots of people or something like that, So I think that's how people are trying to get, and that actually makes it functional too, because without that, it would be kind of useless. It needs that training, that human intervention to make it useful. I know that there are people that use ChatGPT to fool humanity and harm them. Yeah, I'm sure there will be, and there are. With any technology, you're going to have people who will do bad things with it. Some will do good things.
Even with nuclear technology, Vahid.
I know. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, that's what Abdu'l-Baha warned. I think everyone knows this story of how Abdu'l-Baha warned one of the ambassadors from Japan,
right,
when he was visiting Paris. He was ambassador from Spain, I believe, and he was visiting Paris, and he happened to have a meeting with Abdu'l-Baha, and he warned them that there was this technology which he fears that humanity will discover, and that before it's time, and he prays that we don't discover it, which could wipe out everybody, you know. And he's basically, it's so obvious if you read it, he's talking about the coming discovery of nuclear technology. It's not even debatable. Yeah. You gotta worry, I guess.
Well, with that, I think we can release you from our clutches. And I thank you so much. This has just been absolutely fascinating, and a lot of food for thought. I'll be thinking about this tomorrow morning and probably every morning for a while now. And I do want to mention quickly that our next speaker is someone I think you referred to in your talks, who is Stephen Phelps.
Oh yes, he's
So,
amazing. Yeah.
So
Oh, you wouldn't miss that.
he'll be here July 7th, Friday night, July 7th. Same bat time, same bat channel. For those of you of a certain age. And he's a smart guy too. Apparently, I'm reading his bio.
Oh, he's very smart.
So Ajit has succeeded in netting another smart guy.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. Thanks to all of you. Thank you, Ajit, for recruiting Vahid for tonight. Thank you, Vahid. And if you have any parting words of wisdom, now would be the time.
I don't have anything to
Okay,
say.
yeah, fair enough.
Unless anyone has questions.
Can I add this
Go
here,
ahead.
that we sent out a YouTube link and a Zoom link. As soon as we hang up, the YouTube link becomes live and you can share this talk with people who were not here today. So
Great.
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
I will share that.
Adib, thank you for being the man behind the curtain tonight. And I think you have the power to end the meeting. So
thank you, everybody.
thank you all of you.
Vahid.
Got
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.